Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Episode 229, recorded November 2nd, 2019. Hello everybody and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of the Total Screen. I am your host, my name is Tyson, and joining me today as always is my partner in crime here at the Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today we are going to be talking about Mr. Robot episode 404, Not Found, and The Good Place season 4 episode 6, A Chip Driver Mystery. So we'll start with Mr. Robot as always. Not really that eventful of an episode.
This was kind of a weird episode, right? Because, it's not that eventful. There's two main stories. Basically the story of obviously we pick up right after the end of the last episode where it looked like, Elliot and Black names.
And Tyrell.
Yeah, Elliot
Mr.
and Tyrell
Golly Gee
Wellick.
Willikers.
Yeah, it looked like they were found out by the Dark Army, and so we open actually inside the surveillance van that's parked outside of Elliot's apartment, with the guy listening to the conversation, and then basically. And then we see, the van doors open, and, Tyrell, smacks him with a hammer, and he goes down.
Seemingly dead. Yes. And so begins Tyrell and Elliot's great caper.
Yes. Their caper to get rid of the body and to get rid of, the van and the equipment.
And make sure that nothing was broadcast out to the Dark Army.
Make sure nothing was broadcast out and to destroy the recording.
So they end up taking the van out to this, diner or mini mart or something kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And they go in to kind of,
By the way, Tyrell's idea.
Yeah. They go in to just buy the gasoline and a lighter and everything to burn that van. But then when they go out to the van, it's gone.
Yes.
So then they go back in and they're trying to figure out how to go somewhere where they can get cell service so Elliot can contact his sister or something. And when they're doing that...
Yeah, but the next town over is, quite a ways away.
Yeah. So they're trying to get the shopkeeper or whatever, this lady to give them the directions, and she's just like, I know you from somewhere, looking at Tyrell Wellick, and she's like, where's it from? And initially she's like, were you on Big Brother? And he's like, oh, yeah, that's where you know me from, or something.
Right.
And then, but she's still suspicious. Yeah, she's still suspicious. She goes, are you Tyrell Wellick? And he's like, no, you have me confused with somebody else. And it's just, yeah, Elliot loses his temper with her.
Yeah, Elliot, flips out after a while. You gotta realize she was, super annoying. She was, doing the shit for, a while. Guessing who he was and not, really helping them or answering their questions.
Yeah, so finally, they get the information they need from her, and Elliot's like, Jesus Christ. Finally, they take off. Yeah. And, they get, lost in the woods. And they start hearing this sound like an animal. And they're nervous about this, and they end up having, a big fight.
Well, because they're in the woods, because she tells them, there's a shortcut through woods where, they could get there in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, if they take the shortcut through the woods.
Yeah.
But all it does is get them lost.
Yeah.
And this is the bulk of the episode, because as they're walking through woods trying to find their way to this town, we get this interplay between Elliot and Tyrell, where it really goes into Tyrell's motivations and also more into Elliot's motivations. Tyrell, it's mostly from Tyrell's perspective because Elliot's not really talking, so it's Tyrell doing all talking, but he's coming to these revelations he's like, oh, I wear this super expensive suit and everything because I strive to all my life I want to impress people. I want to have a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. And then he makes a contrast to him with Elliot. He's like, but you're always in that goddamn hoodie. Every time I see you, that's all you wear. And he's like, and I realize that's because you never gave a shit. You never cared about anything. One of the things he says is when I first met you, we were at Allsafe, we were Allsafe's biggest client, and you couldn't care less.
Mm-hmm.
and he's having like this kind of pity party, I guess, because like he's like, oh, you never cared about me, like to Elliot.
And Elliot's just not in a mood for anything. So he's like, yeah, you're right. I don't give a shit. I don't care about you.
I don't care about you. Yeah, exactly.
He goes to kind of like leave Elliot, or to leave Tyrell and just walk away. He ends up coming back though, because he's like, I couldn't leave you. So there's something about Elliot that does care, but he's struggling. He's frustrated and he just wants to kind of get a move on.
Right. He's not like in the best of moods. So, yeah.
So Elliot and Tyrell end up continuing to move on. And, this time they make a break out of the woods. They hit the road again and they see like a dead deer.
Well, and then they see the van.
Yeah. And then when they look up from the dead deer, they see the van kind of crashed off on the side of the road. Like it steered off the road.
Yeah. So basically what happened was the guy in the van regained consciousness, took control of the van while they were in the convenience store, tried to drive off, and ended up running into a deer.
Yeah.
Or at least he hit the deer because the deer's injured. He hit the deer, van ran off the road, and it turns out he didn't get very far because they show like they come out of the woods and they come onto the road and they circle around. They show they're right outside of the goddamn convenience store after walking that whole time.
Yeah.
And so they didn't get very far, and then shortly from there they find the van. So that guy didn't even get that far.
Yeah. So it's just Dumb and Dumber mistakes left and right.
Yeah, exactly.
They get to the van. The guy in the van, he's like kind of semi-conscious. He starts shooting at them. And then when he realizes he's done for, he just blows his own brains out.
Right.
And, Elliot's like, okay, well, now we can take care of this. But then
it turns out Tyrell took a bullet.
Yeah. He's got a stomach wound. And he's telling Elliot just to kind of move on.
Right. Just to leave him
go.
there and
And
move
Elliot
on.
is saying he can't do that. He can't let him die. He's like, gotta take you to the hospital. And Tyrell's like, if you take me to the hospital, the Dark Army will find me, and then they'll find you. So he's like, just take care of the evidence, get rid of it, and that's it.
He's like, if you take me to the hospital, I'm dead anyway, and so are you.
Yeah. So he says he's like done. He kind of walks off, and basically the end of the episode is him like hearing that sound again, but much clearer. Yeah. And then he's like looking at a glowing light.
Yeah,
it's kind of a Pulp Fiction moment with like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, kind of where you're like, well, okay, what's that? We'll probably never know. I'm sure they're never going to tell us what that was. And so seemingly Tyrell dies.
Seemingly he dies. Yeah, we don't know, the blue light, I assume, is symbolic.
It's something.
It's something. It's a thing. But then we also have a storyline also going on at the same time with Elliot's sister, Angela. Not Angela.
Darlene.
Darlene. I knew I was going to mess that up.
Yeah. Darlene's designated driving dilemma.
Yeah, her designated driver. Because she was picking the lock on, the wrong car at the wrong time, I guess.
Well, before that, Elliot never arrived back at Allsafe where he was supposed to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and then she went to his apartment, and it was, the door was open, and there was a note that said they're listening.
Mm-hmm.
She ended up getting some message from Elliot that was just like GPS coordinates. And so she goes out and she's trying to steal a car so she can drive out to these GPS coordinates. Yeah. And this drunk Santa is like, hey, thief, what are you doing? And Darlene ends up figuring out, she says, well, cause he's like, hey, can you start my car? I don't have my keys. Cause she was gonna steal it anyways, which means she'd have some way to start it.
Right.
And so she kind of comes up with a compromise. She's like, hey, cause when she finds out where he's going, it's kind of in the same direction she was headed. So she's like, hey, I'll drive you and drop you off home if you let me borrow your car to run an errand. And drunk Santa's like, yeah, sure.
And he says, so they go on a trip because he's like, they're in New York City, and he says, oh, well, he lives upstate.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on how far upstate, she's looking at like a 3 to 6 hour drive. Just to steal a car.
Yeah. Well, I think is in the direction she was heading in anyways. That's why, because it was after he said that he was going upstate that she came up with that compromise.
That's true, yeah.
She could have stolen another car if it was that far out of the way.
But she's going in the direction where Elliot's GPS location, so they must be somewhere.
Yeah,
there
upstate
too.
As well, yeah. She's driving drunk Santa, and they're having this kind of somber conversation, and he's basically coming across as, like, depressed. He's got, like, some prescription medications in his pocket.
Yeah. He's talking about something happening to his wife, ever since...
Yeah.
Ever since my wife.
Yeah. He's talking about that. He's talking about... He reveals that he was, like, volunteering as a Santa to, like, visit, like, a children's hospital, and he's talking about kind of like the tragedy of their lives and how small some of them are and how that's like, they're so small that it's like they were born to die. And he's like going on about how like, he's not going to be able to see them again or something. He's making these very cryptic comments. And like, so it sounds like he's getting ready to kill himself.
Darlene's like, damn, I gotta help this guy.
So she drops him off and he makes like one last cryptic comment and she's like, starts to walk away and then she stops and she calls out to him and she's like, don't like do anything. And he's kind of confused. By the way, we should say when they get to his house, his car is at his house. So he was just drunk and didn't realize that he had a ride into the city.
That was like, that car belongs to somebody who gave him a ride.
So she stole some random car. It wasn't that guy's car, but which is what she was originally intending to do anyways. But like, it just means her whole encounter was just kind of random. But yeah, so she kind of like makes a comment to him about not dying or like not doing anything to kill himself or hurt himself. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he starts kind of revealing all these like misconceptions. Some of the cryptic comments he's making were like quotes from books. I think he quoted Steinbeck at one point. And then like when he's talking about his wife, it's like, yeah, she had an accident. She's like laid up. She's not dead.
She hurt her back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when she starts going like, oh God, what kind of idiot am I? And starts like going to take off, he kind of stops her and says, do you need to talk about something? And she kind of like breaks down that she's, everybody in her life is kind of gone except her brother, and her brother's being a real asshole, but she's still really like worried about him. And so, yeah, the guy, he just says like, well, I hope you find your brother and I hope he's okay. And it's kind of like just, that's what this whole episode is. It's just the characters getting themselves into certain mental places.
Right.
So she does that and that's her story.
Yes.
There's a third story, the best story of the episode.
The best story of the episode.
Which is Dom's just horny for Dark Army Damp Dreams.
Yes.
Dom is sitting at home on Christmas Eve by herself, masturbating to the footage of Darlene's interrogation.
Yes. Which, even if you find Darlene, like, super hot, that's still a weird thing to masturbate to. I'm sorry.
Well, they had, like, a relationship, like a very short-lived
I remember
thing in the last season.
Still kind of weird.
Yeah. I don't know. Oh, it's definitely weird, but it's like, it's from the part of feelings less than, like, actual,
True.
like, imagery, sexual imagery or anything.
Yeah, it's feelings, right.
And so she's trying to masturbate and she's frustrated because it's, that it's just, as we said, it's a weird thing to masturbate to.
It's not working out.
Yeah.
So she decides to go online to go IRC.
Do some cybering.
And do some cybering.
Yeah, so she's cybering with some guy.
But she falls asleep before they even get started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's starting to get started with him, and then she falls asleep, and she says like, oh, I'm sorry I fall asleep. And she's talking to the guy, and the guy's like, well, why don't we meet up in real life? So they start going through this whole thing, and then she reveals like, oh, sorry, like actually in real life I'm not into dudes. I've switched teams quite a while ago, and
then he replies, "Oh, I'm not actually a dude. I just pretend to be one online."
Yeah. So they talk about meeting up, and Dom gives her
Dom gets like super
her
excited.
address. Just very like, people, listeners at home, do not give out your address to some random person you cyber on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Especially like, when you have like the Dark Army breathing down your neck, like how is that like responsible? It's like, what the hell? It's like, God, there's desperation, but there's also throwing all caution to the wind.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess in her position, she probably just doesn't care anymore, so.
Probably.
She probably wouldn't really care if she was killed at that point.
If I was in her position, I'd be like, 9 out of 10 odds this is like a Dark Army plan. But whatever.
So she ends up meeting up. This woman is in her house, and it's a little awkward, but they start hooking up. And then Dom says like, oh, hold on just a moment. And she goes to the bathroom, and the bathroom's all made up like romantic. Like the bathtub has like rose petals in it and stuff.
Right.
And there's candles. Right. And she's kind of looking at it, kind of confused. And then the woman comes into the bathroom, and she's wearing a Dark Army mask.
Yes, and she starts drowning Dom in the bathtub.
And at the point where it looks like Dom's dead, she wakes up.
You missed the important part where while she's drowning Dom, she tells Dom that she has to just let go and stop fighting it.
Mm-hmm. That's, as we said, this whole episode is just about getting people into the right mental place.
Right.
And so that's Dom's subconscious because she wakes up.
She wakes up and she finds that she's still cybering this dude, and basically what happened was the dude like got bored of waiting for her and logged off, and there was no conversation where it was like, oh my god, I'm actually a girl, let's meet up and fuck. Yeah. that part was a dream.
And so that's her story.
Yeah, that was it.
That was Mr. Robot this week.
It was a very
the most famous air message, 404, and they kind of the most boring episode of the season.
I was gonna say it was the most introspective episode because it was more about characters.
It was that too, but it was also boring.
Yeah.
I say it was completely uneventful, except like seemingly one of the sub main characters is now dead, seemingly. So in a way that means it's more eventful than I guess last week's episode. I
guess it doesn't help that this comes from like last week's episode, which was a really great episode.
Yeah.
With like the backstory and everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a horrible episode, Rose. This episode. It's just kind of like, okay, wow, this was just nothing.
No, I agree with you. I agree. I agree. It was nothing. Plot-wise, this was very weak.
And it's kind of sad if, like, all that Tyrell shit, like, why did they even bother putting him in the season? You know what I mean? Like, for this?
For this. There was that, the Darlene storyline was pointless. The Dom storyline was really pointless. Just a silly dream sequence to ever come to that revelation, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, you're right.
It's just kind of, I don't know, like, it felt like last week's episode with everything going on, you had Elliot's date was kind of there to put him into the right mind space. Of, like, being able to connect with people again. And then it just seems like they almost completely ignored that when this episode started, because he was just being, a loner, antisocial asshole again, like, immediately.
Well, I mean, given the circumstances.
Yeah, but I mean, like, thinking of it from a storytelling perspective, like, you go from, like, giving Elliot a revelation to just having him be, like he was right before having that revelation.
Right.
Regardless of the circumstances, that's in the writing, that's the choice.
Right.
It just kind of feels like a little, like, weak, like, okay, that felt unnecessary. And then what was Tyrell's role in there, and from, like, him showing up at the end of the last episode, just to get rid of this character, like, to tie up a loose end? Just
to have this episode happen and then kill him? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like they wanted to have a final moment for the actor, I guess? I don't know.
Right.
Like, this actor worked with us for these seasons, we should probably have a good farewell moment for him. It's like, okay, so we had had that weird scene in like episode 1 of this season where he was just bored at his office, and then this, and it's like, okay, they could have just completely ignored his character. And if this is it for his character, if there's nothing else for his character in this season, then this was a complete waste to even bring him back. It just doesn't make any sense. We'll see, like, if there is more having to do with his character. But it's just kind of a weird thing. It's almost like, it's one of those situations where it's like they wrote the scene as a goodbye for the actor because the show's ending, rather than because it was necessary for him to have a scene.
Right. I get what you're saying.
So it's kind of like, I mean, that kind of stuff happens on final seasons. You always end up having those kind of unnecessary moments. It's like, oh, let's say goodbye to this character now. And it's like, but completely pointless.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it seems like this is so far. Like I said, he's seemingly dead. We don't really know. It was a very ambiguous, weird.
We'll have to wait till next
final ending moment. We'll see next week, or if they even address that next week, you know? Who knows? See. Maybe it'll just never be addressed. Like, that's just it. We don't know. We'll see what ends up happening with that. But yeah, that's, Christmas Eve. Late night Christmas Eve. That's what this episode was. Characters getting into the right mental state, I guess. One other thing we should say, I guess, is that Darlene said, you know, another thing that makes this episode kind of like a what the fuck is it kind of invalidates a lot of what happened in the last episode, because Darlene's like, oh yeah, you know, you got that code from that girl. She's saying this on a voicemail to Elliot before she realizes he's like off somewhere. She's like, I hacked in with the code you gave me, and she just doesn't have any access, actually.
Right.
So it's back to the drawing board. So it just kind of makes like last week's episode almost invalidated too.
Not really, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Not all of last week's episode, not like the White Rose stuff, but it makes like his whole date with her, besides the moment of him learning to reconnect, which again, like I said, it seems like he lost that thread this episode already. It's just kind of like, okay, that plot development wise, like him getting that movement forward in their plan, like was all waste.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, not a great episode. You know what I'm starting to wonder is that I think this season is 13 episodes or like 14 episodes, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to wonder with this and with the kind of like the way they're invalidating some of the stuff from the last episode, that they don't have enough story for the amount of episodes they have left.
I don't know. I don't believe like that's the case, but I guess we'll know eventually, right?
Because it kind of feels like that kind of territory. Like they said, okay, we need to wrap up this story this season. They came up with a wrap up, but it's like maybe an 8 episode wrap up, and they have 13 episodes. Like it just kind of it's starting to feel like that kind of situation, at least to me.
Right.
Which is, I'm good with like character introspection moments, things like that, you know, but man, that's all this episode was. Like there's no forward momentum at all.
Right.
There's actually, like I said, a little bit of backward momentum. Yeah, we'll have to see what's coming up. You know, still a decent episode. It's just kind of like, just not much of an episode.
I agree.
So let's move on. Let's talk about The Good Place, Season 4, Episode 6, A Chip Driver Mystery. So starting off, you know me well. What do I love? I love a great framing device.
Yes.
And
you sure do.
That's how this episode begins. It begins with a great framing device. Michael approaching bad Janet, I believe in Janet's void, good Janet's void, where she's been locked up. And he tells her he's going to let her go, but he's going to tell her a story first. And that's what this is. So like, instead of just kind of jumping into like, okay, what's the next event? Or using this as like, oh, this is a scene, and then we're going to jump back into the episode. It's him telling the story of what would happened in this stretch of time, basically.
Right.
Looking back upon it.
In this stretch of Bearamy.
Yes, the stretch of Bearamy. He's telling her the story in hopes that it's going to kind of make some kind of influence and change her. And I mean, there's like a cool thing at the end, which I'll just say now because we're going to get mainly into the main contents of the episode rather than the framing device. But there's a cool thing at the end where like when he reveals kind of like the point of him telling her this whole story was that he came to the realization that even if the humans aren't necessarily good or completely good. That what's important is that they're getting better or they're trying to be better. And he uses that to say, and that's why I can't just keep you here locked up.
Right.
That's not right. Like, I have to let you go. But he wanted to tell her that story first to kind of frame it. And he ends up giving her a book about, basically what he was just describing. That whole moment, in a bound book. And, when she's leaving, she's kind of a little thrown by that. Like, she's like, oh, like, how stupid you're letting me go, oh yeah, good guys are so stupid, what are you doing? But then she keeps, like, looking back, too. Like, she's kind of like, you can see he's kind of successfully planted a seed of doubt in her mind.
Yes. You can see he was successful in what he attempted to do.
I also gotta say real quick, while we're still on the framing device, before we get into the actual episode, I love the way they tie in sometimes with the little opening chime that they do, where like they started it with her going like, okay, before you start the story, and she started just like ripping out this big fart.
Yes.
And then it cut to the chimes, and then it came back and she was like still in the middle of the fart.
That was great.
So I love little details like that the show does, that's playful with its
the
own
show
title.
excels at
chime.
those little details.
Yeah.
And so what is this story of inspiration that Michael tells Ben Jin? What inspiring events happened that led to this?
Brent wrote a book.
It's Brent wrote a book. Apparently, we started out because they get back from a ski trip, and apparently Brent was getting better. Like Brent was still Brent, but less Brent than usual. So it's the best way I can describe it. and so like basically they're celebrating, because they're celebrating him because basically they're like, oh well, he's acting like less of an asshole now. And then I think Tahani points out, yeah, but his motivation's still fucked up. But then Eleanor's like, well, first we're work on the behavior, then we work on the motivation.
Yeah.
We just want to get Brent in the habit of doing good things first, and then we'll fix his motivation for doing them.
Yeah, that's kind of their strategy. So there's nothing wrong about it being for the wrong motivation right now, because that is their entire strategy to work on him, because he's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is their way of doing it, is you motivate him to do it, incorrectly, and then once you get him kind of like used to that behavior, then you kind of start working on the actual underlying issue.
Yes.
It's kind of like prescribing medication while doing therapy.
Yes. While doing therapy, yes.
The medication kind of helps you, curb the behavior, the symptoms, and then you start working on the actual underlying issues.
Great strategy, but then it falls apart.
Yeah, because Brent writes a book.
Yes.
A novel, we should say.
A novel. Chip Driver, detective novel.
Yeah.
But he solves the crime on page 10, and it's over 500 pages.
Yeah. And it's basically just like the worst kind of like wish fulfillment.
Yes, it's,
like
it's obviously like
ego boosting.
He bases all the characters on everybody in the neighborhood, so Chip Driver is obviously based on him, because he's like
and he's just perfect in every way.
He's just perfect. He's the best golfer and the greatest detective. I think at one point they said he's supposed to be like a super strong, like Marine and the president.
Yeah, he's just like everything.
Yes.
You have like a cheaty character who's like basically like a loser who can never, like, he's afraid of everything.
He's afraid of everything. Like
Tahani is like his characters are Brent's character's girlfriend, who's like
he keeps the
worst stereotypes,
over sexualizing and everything.
Oh yeah, just playing on like the absolute worst, like stupid stereotypes of just like not only like her race, but like her being like British, like just all the kind of like worst stereotypes of everything about her, like all these snap judgment kind of things about her. It's just like offensive. Yeah, everybody kind of falls into these roles like that, and it's basically just about how wonderful he is. And he wants everybody to read the book and then introduce him, and he's throwing like his big book event thing. And he's so excited to sell his book, but as Michael reminds him, like there's no
first he
money.
Gives his book to like everybody to read it, expecting them to like give him like compliments. He calls them compos.
Yeah.
he says, okay, you're supposed to introduce me and give me a lot of compos based on my book, but everybody like hates it because it's so bad, and he's like making fun of everybody in the book.
Yeah, and Simone is the one who's just not, like, at all being willing to, like, play along. Like everybody's, like, trying to kind of be nice about it, but Simone's like, no, fuck that. Like, why is it incumbent on us to, like, you know, to infantilize this asshole? You know?
Right.
He's gonna do these stupid ass things. He's gonna write a book that's so offensive, that's all this stuff. And just because he doesn't, like, mean bad by it, we're supposed to, like, tolerate it and put up with it and try to, like, help him. Like, why is this upon us? Which is like, it's similar to, like, a philosophy that's going on right now in the world. The whole idea of, like, I've seen this repeated, by, like, black people when there's been stuff going on about racism and, like, the debate on racism where they're saying, like, it's not incumbent upon black people to educate white people about why racism is wrong.
I love all the references in this because also, like, when Michael confronts Brent and convinces him to apologize.
He's apologizing for their offense rather than for...
Yeah, it's hilarious because he's like, okay, I'm sorry if you are offended.
But I did nothing wrong.
Yeah, but I did nothing wrong. Like, he says it like, I did nothing wrong. Like, everybody knows that, right?
This finally eventually pushes, like, Chidi over the edge.
Oh my god, yeah, Chidi finally, he loses it and he freaking, like, decks Brent, which is, like, the most un-Chidi thing in the world. But Brent drove him to that.
Yeah, Brent drove Chidi to punching him. They kind of, everything kind of seemed to be falling apart, and it ended up falling back into a meeting of all of the, you know, our main players, Eleanor, Tahani, Jason, Janet, and Michael. Basically ended up falling into a meeting of all of them. So they end up, having a meeting with this group of people and trying to kind of figure out what they're gonna do. At first it seemed like everything was completely ruined by this point. And so, like, when in the framing device at that point, that's like, you know, Bad Janet gloating that, like, see, like, you know, your whole plan, nothing worked out. That's all you wanted to tell me about is how badly you guys failed. And Michael's like, well, I didn't say the story was over yet. And so the idea is that everybody was going to work hard again and try to do things again. And it doesn't actually give you any resolution on what's happening. Like, it doesn't, like, solve the issue at hand. It's just them strategizing how to solve it.
Right.
And that's where Michael exits out. And like I said, in the framing device, telling Bad Janet that it's not about them being perfect. It's about them trying to be better, you know?
Michael has the epiphany in that moment where he realizes that it's not about them being better. It's about them striving to be better, you know?
Yes.
As long as they are trying, that is the real purpose because nobody can ever be perfect. But,
yes.
you know, Brent still has a lot trying to do.
I love, we always try to point out at least, like, one joke, and the one, I sent it to you, like, after I'd watched the episode on Discord, I'd sent it over to you, which was Jason saying, that's how I got my nickname, the Defendant.
Oh, yeah, well, because Jason's trying to give a pep talk to Chidi, right? Because Jason basically tells Chidi, just do what I do and do the first thing that comes into your mind without thinking about the consequence, without thinking about what's going to happen, without even thinking about what's going to happen. That's how I got my nickname, the Defendant.
This is a great line. And that kind of segues us into probably, like, our last point to discuss on the episode, which is there was a subplot besides what else was going on with the gossip columnist character, John.
Yes,
discovering Jason's secret.
Yeah, he finds out Jason is really Jason.
Yeah.
And since, like, his whole thing is gossip, he has to, like, now he knows, like, a secret that nobody else knows, and he has to go and shout it to the world because that's his impulse.
To his credit, that it's his impulse to do that, but to his credit, you can say that this character has already changed because he doesn't want to do it. Like, he feels like he's going to do it, but he's like, oh, I know it's wrong. I shouldn't do this, you know? But
I know it's wrong, but yeah. And Chidi has the task task of trying to convince him to keep the secret, which is really funny. There's this one point where Chidi is like, Kant would say, a secret, given in confidence is to be protected or something like that. And then he's like, yeah, but this other person I follow says, if you got a secret, tell it. And then Chidi is just like exasperated. He just says, please listen to Kant.
Yeah, so so that was just in our subplot we needed to kind of at least bring up to address is that I like that the one solution to bargaining that Chidi's able to do is that Jason's going to teach him the dance move that that he's jealous of. And he's all okay, but only if you teach me the whole dance.
The dance from Magic Mike.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but only if you teach me the whole dance. And that's it for the episode. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of bring up?
No, that was everything, I think.
Yeah, as we said at the beginning of the podcast, this is a very uneventful for these two episodes, this week. I think the Good Place episode was good, and like I said, I do love a good framing device.
I did enjoy the Good Place, although I read like a lot of people online seem to have hated this episode. I agree, it was like another episode that doesn't seem to have moved the plot forward. I mean, we don't seem to be like any further at the end of the episode than we were at the beginning of the episode. So I kind of get that. But I still thought like Brent, Brent is hilarious as like this asshole that you just hate. And I just thought there was like so many funny things like with like Brent's like non-apology, Chidi like flipping out, losing his shit,
I love how when Michael is in the framing device, when Michael is giving Bad Janet the book, or like he's all, and I have a gift for you, and she's like, is it Brent's book?
Yeah, she's excited. Yeah.
And then he says like, no, but like it wasn't because he wasn't going to do that. Like he actually was going to do that, but like he's like, I actually can't physically buy the book because I don't have money.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because there's at one point where at the book signs Brent's, because after they tell Brent like his book sucks, like Brent is kind of like, fine, I was going to give you a discount, but now you're going to have to buy the book for full price. And then Michael has to interject and said, actually there isn't money in the Good Place.
Yeah. Which actually brings closer to, there's like a little theory from the show that was started when we got that revelation last season about like the fact that nobody has been nobody's gone to the Good Place in like for so many like hundreds of years or something, and like people like were looking back at around when that date would have been, and it kind of coincides with like the development of like paper money, like paper currency as like money being the root of all evil.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
and so here we have this whole thing about like, money doesn't exist in the Good Place. Which is kind of like, oh, okay, that's interesting. That kind of ties back into that concept a little bit, that like money is what ruined us as people, and sent us all, into the bad place.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting.
So that's just a little cool thing. But I just liked it in the context of the joke here, which is, Michael's it was like, actually, I would have gotten you the book, but I physically can't buy it because I don't have money. It's impossible. It just exists there not to be touched. So I thought that was kind of cool. But that's it. So all we have left to do this week is talk about what's coming up on the week ahead. So we're recording this on Saturday, November 2nd, but on Friday, November 1st, American Son came to Netflix, Atypical to Netflix, Haché to Netflix, We Are the Wave to Netflix, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan series had its season 2 on Amazon Prime, In the Long Run on Starz, and then Apple TV Plus started. Have you gotten this service? Or like, I know they're giving it away for people who get like some of the new hardware or something.
They're giving away, it's a year free for anybody who buys a new Apple device this year. I did not buy a new Apple device because I don't like have that kind of money to be thrown around, and I'm certainly not going to jump to spend like $800 just for the sake of getting a free year of this service. Like that would be dumb.
Doesn't that equal out?
Yeah.
It's like $5 a month without it, right? So I mean, God. If you think about it.
So actually Actually, we should talk a little bit about
$800 is a saving for $60 of worth of service.
We should actually talk a little bit about this because like it did premiere, and the lineup of shows got mixed reviews.
Yeah,
some of the reviews were brutal. C and the morning show got like the worst reviews, and
well,
I
like
think
mixed because some people liked both of those shows.
Oh, really? Okay, I heard like out of the slate, like those were getting like the worst reviews.
Those were the most polarizing of the shows.
One of like the major critics, TV critics, basically said he tweeted about the morning show. He said Apple paid $300 million for an NBC show for a show NBC could have made 15 years ago.
Yeah, I've also seen it compared to like The Newsroom, which was an HBO show from a few years ago, but saying like it was like a worse The Newsroom.
Right.
Like The Newsroom, but not as good.
Right.
They paid an absurd amount of money for all of these shows. It doesn't seem that the ratings don't seem to be that positive. Like I said though, with the morning show and C, they were mixed reviews, so it meant that some people liked it and some people didn't, you know?
Right.
It was polarizing. The two shows that seemed to fare better though, were Dickinson seemed to fare better. People thought that was kind of charming. I did hear a lot of people say though that like the amount of money Apple spent on it like doesn't equate for like just a little charming show.
Which was kind of surprising because I thought the trailer looked like garbage.
Well, it's not the kind of show that either of us would probably like. But I know the kind of audience that show is targeted towards. And like I could imagine them liking it, but it's also not the kind of audience that you'd have like a really high budget show for.
Right, no, you wouldn't. But Apple's spending a budget anyway.
Yeah. And then the one that seemed to actually get pretty much universal praise was For All Mankind, which is the new Ronald D. Moore show.
Yeah, that one got the most praise out of the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Which, Ronald D. Moore, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Given the talent
people
behind
attached,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, given the people attached. But I think the consensus is like Apple really spent on a lineup that's not impressive enough to get those subs. You know, like people who bought a new device obviously get the year for free, but outside of that, it's like, am I racing the sign? No, not based on that. I'm not.
I hear they have like a horror series that is supposed to actually be really good, but it didn't come out at launch. Like it's coming out later this year. And people were saying it was a little weird, but you know, the idea is basically that it was a horror series that would be coming out the day after Halloween. So they kind of like maybe delayed it for that reason, because critics already have like the first 6 episodes of that.
And
show.
I actually thought like, oh, you know, maybe you could go on iTunes and like buy individual episodes of but they are actually not up on iTunes for sale. In fact, I did search for like any of these shows on the iTunes store, and they don't even come up, as if they don't exist. So you literally need this Apple TV subscription to watch these shows.
I kind of want to see For All Mankind. That's the only show I have any interest in that's been announced. Not even just the ones that are out now, but the ones that have been announced at all. That's like the only one I'm kind of really interested in. But I don't like Apple.
I don't like.
I don't want to give them any of my money.
What's not to like?
I am not a fan of that company, and I don't want to give them my money. So I don't know. Maybe like if it did become available to buy separately, maybe I'd buy For All Mankind. Like, you know, I don't think I'd buy it through iTunes because I hate using that. But if they just released it on all of the paid services, like if you could buy the episodes on Amazon or Google or whatever.
You can't even buy the episodes on iTunes.
Yeah, Apple, well, I figured that because it's still, it would just be their service. Like, it would be everywhere, or it would just be on their service.
Right, it's just on the Apple TV Plus, because if they were going to start selling it on Google or stuff, I would think they would sell it on iTunes first.
Oh, well, they'd probably, like, that's what I'm saying, like, they'd probably, if they put it up for individual sale, not through a subscription, they'd put it on all of them at the same time. That tends to be the way it's done, you know? Like, right. If Amazon puts up a show that, you know, like, they'll put it up on everything, I think. I don't know. I don't really have a lot of experience with that, so who knows?
The other big streaming news this week was HBO Max. had their big reveal, had their big, all the details, and they announced some stuff that was coming. They announced they got South Park, the whole series, to HBO Max, which is big.
Yeah, they won like the bidding war on that.
They won the bidding war for that. They announced, guess what? Major Game of Thrones news. Major Game of Thrones news. House of the Dragon is official. It's been ordered for 10 episodes season for HBO and HBO Max. This was not the spin-off featuring Naomi Watts. That one is not moving forward.
It's dead. This is the one with dragons.
Yeah, this is the one based off of Fire and Blood, about the history of the Targaryens.
The original prequel series wasn't going to have dragons in it. This one is. That's why.
No, the original prequel series was about the history of the Starks and the White Walkers. This is the history of the Targaryens instead.
Yeah.
HBO decided Targaryens are more interesting than Starks.
Well, the Starks should actually be in that one too, because it's going to follow the Targaryens past the events of the conquest and stuff.
It's going to pass, but it's going to take time to get there because we're going to start.
I don't know. I think it might take place.
We're going to start before the conquest.
I don't think so.
I think so because that's where the book starts. And it'd be shitty.
Here's what you have to consider.
It'd be shitty if we did not explore that history before the conquest.
Yeah, but this isn't something that happened in a matter of years. This is something that happened over the matter of hundreds of years.
Yes.
I think this is going to take place in the recent past in the show, and is going to flash back to the other events.
I don't believe so. Because
otherwise they're going to have to do it as an anthology series.
Yeah, which is fine by me.
I don't think they're going to do that.
It would be shitty if they did it the way you did it, because that's
because they want you to invest in a group of characters. So they can't have you fully invest in a group of characters if they're going to skip 100 years ahead every so often. There's going to be way too many time skips and stuff. I think the only way to do it, to have a solid narrative, and to do it is if they, the show kind of travels back and forth through flashbacks or through history.
If we did flashbacks, that'd be so lame. That'd be so lame.
I kind of have a feeling this show is going to take place not even during the conquest, after the conquest. I think it's going to take place during the Dance of the Dragons.
Oh no,
which is like a huge war.
That's like the end of Fire and Blood. That's like
but I think
the end of the book. If we start at the end of the book, that's fucked up.
No, well, but it's going to start, but while giving context all throughout. It's going to start with the build up to that.
Right.
It's going to start with the characters that were in that story, is what I'm saying. But before that story. And then it's going to kind of fill in all the gaps in the past, and then go through, and then the Dance of the Dragons is going to be the end of the story.
Right.
But, you can't, cast a lead, and then have that lead, or a group of leads, or, a cast, follow through the series if you start the beginning, because it would be, hundreds of years.
I don't know how they're going to do that, because, obviously, they looked at this book, which is literally written as an in-universe history book. It's not even written like a traditional novel. George wrote it as an in-universe history book written by a maester.
That's the way you do it, is you make that maester one of the characters in the story.
Yeah, you make him he would obviously be the framing device.
Exactly.
But you make him you could do that. But I just have to figure because they said the showrunner for a show, it was his idea to adapt the book. And so you gotta think he has a plan in mind for that. You gotta think he figured out the way he wants to do it. I don't know. Yeah. I just don't want them to do it in a way that because the backstory itself is interesting and exciting, and I want to see it come alive. But you
don't want an adaptation of a textbook either.
Right. Yeah.
That's the problem.
It's not gonna. Yeah. It's not gonna be a straight adaptation of like you said. It's not gonna be an adaptation of a textbook. I don't know.
I think the best way to do it is to have the book take place in the latest era of the book, and then address the stuff before it throughout the show as a framing device. Especially if you have the Meister who wrote the book as a character, then you could actually have full-blown segments or story arcs that take place in the past that are through his perspective of writing them.
Right.
So I think that's the best way to do it, because then you have your attention on these characters that are in this other story,
Right.
So, like, if you do it the other way, it's going to feel like an adaptation of a textbook, I think.
I see where you're coming from. I'm super hyped for this, obviously. I think it's great. I know, like, a lot of people, I saw a lot of people online groaning, like, oh, Targaryens, Daenerys sucked. And I'm like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It's like, they're super interesting. Like, you know, it's not just Daenerys, like, it's this entire dynasty. There's a lot of great characters, you know, like, a lot of interesting, you know, people in this family history. That's, you know, it's fascinating stuff. And
it's the vocal minority of haters are the ones that are speaking up. That's the thing we have to remember. The people that absolutely, like, I think most people were disappointed by season 8 of Game of Thrones, but the people that were like, this is atrocious, I'm so angry, they're a vocal minority.
Yeah. They're a vocal minority, yeah.
So, like, when you look at the online reaction and the way people are going, that's the vocal minority speaking up. So, it's going to be interesting to see how the show fares, though, because, you know, the show did end in a way that disappointed a lot of people. Yeah, and then the vocal minority basically just made it completely undiscussable.
Oh, they did, because they fucking, anytime you get a discussion going about Game of Thrones, they come in and they steamroll it.
Yeah.
And it's like, ugh. Even like, you know, threads about this new show. Oh, why are they bothering? Yeah. I don't know, man, because it was a successful show.
And I'll say my piece here once again. There's people that, just like they're chiming in that they're relieved that Dan and Dave aren't involved in it and stuff. And then they were going off on, you know, because it also came out this week, this isn't TV related, but that Dan and Dave are off of, they're not going to be doing that Star Wars series that they were going to be doing. Not series, but series of movies.
Because they were going to do a trilogy. They were going to do a trilogy. Apparently, from what I read, they want to do the origin of the Jedi.
Yeah. And so people were like, oh my god, they're gonna ruin Star Wars. And my answer to those people is like, so you're saying the prequels didn't exist. You're saying that the new trilogy doesn't exist. Cause in my opinion, Star Wars has already kind of been ruined. So, it's not like they're stepping on sacred ground here, you know?
Yeah.
There's lots of problems with the Star Wars series.
They're not on Star Wars anymore. They're doing whatever for Netflix. And I don't know if it's even going to be anything I'm interested in. But
we have no idea what it's going to be.
Yeah. They got a deal going with Netflix. They'll be doing something. Who knows?
But anyways, back on topic, because this wasn't a news segment. This is what's coming up.
No, it wasn't a news segment, but like some big stuff happened, and I really think like it needed, especially the Game of Thrones, needed some discussion around it.
Yeah, but moving on now. So that was Friday, November 1st.
Yeah.
So on Monday, November 4th, His Dark Materials comes to HBO. This was one of the shows that was on our, you know, next Game of Thrones podcast that we did when we talked about fantasy shows that could be the next Game of Thrones, the next big show.
Getting mixed reviews, so I'm not sure if it's going to be the next Game of Thrones anymore.
I've mostly seen good reviews so far.
I saw some mixed reviews.
So, we'll see. But that's the thing too, is that, you know, I didn't say this with the Apple TV, but it's worth mentioning that mixed reviews doesn't mean bad. Mixed reviews means some people liked it and some people didn't. Sometimes the best things are the things that some people love and some people hate. Right, Twin Peaks is an example of that, you know? Some people just do not like Twin Peaks and they never will and they hate it. And some people absolutely adore Twin Peaks.
And deference, I can understand why somebody would hate Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Totally get it.
But see, that's not a fault of the show. It's not like people love Twin Peaks in spite of its flaws or, you know, despite its flaws.
Right.
They love Twin Peaks for everything they love it for the same reasons that the people that hate it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is sometimes something with mixed reviews could actually be the best thing. Right. It could be better than the thing with universal acclaim.
So what we're saying is watch things and come to your own conclusions.
Exactly.
Don't because
this happens all the time. This is why we have like cult classics. Because cult classics are things that most people aren't going to like, but a small group of people are going to like it so much, you know, that it becomes like something much bigger than like a regular show would for them. You know, like Twin Peaks, the people that like Twin Peaks is huge in a way that, Friends isn't for anyone. You know what I mean? Like, Friends had universal acclaim, but nobody likes Friends as much as the people that love Twin Peaks love Twin Peaks. You know, that's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes mixed reviews actually means it could be better than what you think it is. That's not always the case, though. It could also mean it's trash. Who knows? It could just be middling anyways. The good reviews could be moderate good reviews. We don't know. Then Tuesday, November 5th, 2019, The End of the Fucking World returns on Netflix. On Wednesday, November 6th, 2019, Scams comes to Netflix. On Friday, November 8th, 2019, Wild District on Netflix. On Saturday, November 9th, Little Things on Netflix. It's just Netflix every day of the week. On Saturday, I already said that. Saturday, November 9th is Little Things on Netflix. Sunday, November 10th, Dublin Murders on Starz, Shameless on Showtime, Back to Life on Showtime, and Rick and Morty on Adult Swim. That's a huge show for a lot of people. So that's coming back. Monday, November 11th, Chief of Staff on Netflix. Tuesday, November 12th, The Mandalorian on Disney Plus, because that's when Disney Plus launches. So we got Apple TV Plus, and then on November 12th, Disney Plus comes. So we get The Mandalorian, The World According to Jeff Goldblum, Forky Ask a Question, all those Disney Plus shows coming.
Oh, so excited for The Mandalorian.
Well, not all of them. Not all the ones we know about.
Not all the ones, no.
Yeah, none of the MCU ones are going to be out yet.
Not day one, no.
Yeah, those are coming, but The Mandalorian is day one. Then on Thursday, November 14th, The Stranded comes to Netflix, and lastly, on Friday, November 15th, Dollface comes to Hulu, The Man in the High Castle returns on Amazon Prime, Avlu The Yard to Netflix, and The Club on Netflix. So that's what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. Next week, we're going to be continuing our discussion of The Good Place and Mr. Robot, as usual. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Foxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. And the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very